I don't know if it's just me, but do you ever find yourself looking at your own hands and thinking, how did we even get here? I mean, literally. We're sitting here in the 21st century, using our thumbs to scroll through TikTok or grab a cup of coffee, completely ignoring the fact that for about 90% of Earth's history, the land was basically a no-go zone. If you were a living thing back then, the land was a terrifying, dry, radiation-filled wasteland where dreams and organisms went to die. The story we've all been told since we were kids is the heroic fish narrative. You know the one. A brave little fish gets tired of being bullied by bigger fish, grows some legs, takes a deep breath, and crawls onto the beach like a prehistoric Rocky Balboa. But as it turns out, the real story of how life left the ocean is a lot weirder, a lot more repetitive, and, I'm sorry to say, involves a lot of genetic recycling from parts of the body we usually don't talk about in polite conversation. Today we're going to look at why eyes evolved for the land before legs did, why the first land walkers might have actually been 15-minute breath-holding snails, and why our fingers are, genetically speaking, repurposed butt parts. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. This is the story of how life left the ocean, and trust me, it's absolutely bonkers. Before we get to the animals, we need to clear up a major myth. Most people think the land was just a pile of rocks waiting for the first fish to arrive. But if you were a time traveler standing on a Silurian beach 430 million years ago, you wouldn't see a desert. You'd see what I like to call the era of living scum. You see, microbes and bacteria had been conquering the land for billions of years before we even thought about it. Evidence suggests microbial mats were surviving on land as far back as 3.2 billion years ago. By the time the first animals showed up, the land was already covered in a slimy, colorful bacterial crust and fungal threads that were quietly weathering rocks and changing the atmosphere. It wasn't a forest, it was more like a giant, planet-sized bathroom floor that hadn't been cleaned in an eon. But for a tiny organism, that scum was a functioning ecosystem. Now, who was the first animal to take the plunge? If you asked a paleontologist 10 years ago, they'd say arthropods, the ancestors of bugs and spiders. And it makes sense. Arthropods have hard shells that act like spacesuits to keep them from drying out. Plus, they fossilize easily, which gives them a bit of a preservation bias in the record. But a 2024 study out of London's Natural History Museum flipped the script. They re-examined 500-million-year-old Cambrian trace fossils, basically fossilized crawl marks, and realized they weren't made by bugs. They were made by mollusks. Think of a soft-bodied, slug-like thing making its way across the mud. The wild detail here is the breath-holding theory. By modeling how these creatures moved, scientists calculated that these mollusk things could endure at least 15 minutes of air exposure. They weren't just collapsing the moment they left the water. They were on a timed 15-minute expedition onto dry ground 500 million years ago. It was like a prehistoric heist movie. Get in, grab some of that bacterial scum for lunch, and get back to the water before your lungs dry out. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive parts of evolution. Most of us think that legs came first, and then we learned to see on land. But a 2017 study suggests the exact opposite. Eyes came onto land before legs did. Imagine a fish living in the shallows. Underwater, eyes are kind of meh. You can only see what's right in front of you because water is dense and murky. But the moment a fish pokes its eyes above the waterline, it can see roughly 70 times farther in the air than in the water. During the transition, some fish saw their eyes triple in size and migrate from the sides of their heads to the top. Just like a modern crocodile, this tripling of eye size expanded the volume of space they could monitor by about 1,000,000-fold. The theory is that these fish saw an untouched buffet of insects and worms scurrying around on the shore. And only then did evolution bother turning fins into limbs to go get it. It's essentially the I see it, I want it school of evolution. Okay, let's talk about your hands. This is the part of the video where things get a little uncomfortable. For a long time, we didn't know how fish fins turned into complex digits like fingers and toes. Scientists recently used CRISPR to delete a specific control tower region of the genome in fish, expecting it to mess with their fins. Instead, it knocked out the development of the cloaca, which is the shared opening fish use for, well, everything exit-related. As it turns out, evolution didn't invent a new genetic toolkit to build our fingers. It hijacked the genetic switches used to build the terminal end of the digestive tract. Nature is essentially a master of recycling the old to make the new. As one geneticist put it, fingers and cloacas are both the end of something. One is the end of a limb, the other is the end of a tube. So next time you're typing an email, just remember that your fingers are, scientifically speaking, repurposed butt parts. You're welcome. We can't talk about leaving the ocean without mentioning Tiktaalik, the famous fishapod. For a long time, Tiktaalik was the poster child for walking, but new research into its pelvis tells a different story. It had a surprisingly large muscular pelvis and mobile rear fins, but it probably wasn't walking on land like a dog. Instead, it was likely using those limbs as props and paddles in the shallow water. Think of it like a guy at a pool party who stays in the shallow end, using his arms to push off the bottom while his head stays above water. It was an underwater walker long before it was a land runner. The most important thing to remember is that leaving the ocean wasn't a single heroic event. It was a massive, uncoordinated jailbreak that happened dozens of times independently. Plants did it, fungi did it, snails did it, and arthropods? They did it at least 7 separate times. Different groups of crustaceans became woodlice. Different groups of spiders and myriapods made the jump on their own. The land wasn't conquered once. It was invaded over and over by creatures that had nothing to do with each other. It shows that the land, for all its dangers, was an opportunity that life just couldn't ignore. Whether it was to escape a predator, find a new snack, or just find a place where the referee wasn't looking, the move to land is what built our world. So the next time you see a snail in your garden or look at your genetically recycled fingers, just remember the half-billion-year journey it took to get here. From 15-minute breath holders to fish with sky vision, the move to land was a messy, awkward, and brilliant series of accidents. We might not be the kings of the land like the dinosaurs were for 165 million years, but we're the ones who get to tell the story. And in a way, we're still those same fish, poking our eyes out of the water to see what's next on the horizon. Thanks for watching, and until next time on Insight Forge.